The Cincinnati Bengals are getting star receiver Tee Higgins back from Monday night, and that means the Washington Commanders secondary has even more pressure on it, and that means Commanders fans are bracing for an even bigger impact in the passing game this weekend. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Commanders.
You are Locked On Commanders, your daily podcast on the Washington Commanders. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And welcome into today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, David Harrison, credential member of the media covering the Washington Commanders for Sports Illustrated's CommanderGameDay.com. This season, you can also find me contributing to WUSA 9's local coverage of the Commanders as well. I'm here with you every Monday through Friday, and thanks for joining me for today's episode. All of our everydayers out there, special thank you to you for coming through every single day. Locked On Commanders is your daily podcast covering the Washington Commanders, and if you haven't already, you can subscribe for free on YouTube or wherever you are listening to today's episode, in which we are going to make our Week 3 predictions. Washington Commanders visiting the Cincinnati Bengals on Monday night. I will be on my way there Monday afternoon. I'll arrive, go check into the hotel, head straight to the stadium, and we'll be doing this thing like we do every single week. And then, of course, next weekend, we've got another road game, Arizona Cardinals, coming up for the Washington Commanders. We're also going to talk about the 3 keys to the Washington Commanders getting a victory this weekend, do a deeper dive than we did on our crossover episode. And we're going to start it all off with the injury report and the impact of wide receiver Tee Higgins in for the Cincinnati Bengals, defensive end Clelin Ferrell out for the Washington Commanders, and more. Of course, if you want to get even more out of the Locked On Commanders podcast, all you got to do is become an insider by going to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. From there, you can text me all your comments, your questions. I'll be sending you inside information, live text, bonus content, like invitations to our insider-only Zoom. We did not do an insider-only Zoom this week. I apologize for that, but a lot of travel with some family events going on in the state of Ohio this week, which is why we didn't do it. We'll look to get back to doing those ahead of the Arizona Cardinals game next weekend. It's a lot of fun. So again, head over to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders to try it out for free for the first 2 weeks. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get a $200 bonus bet as a reward guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started today. Final injury report dropping for the Cincinnati Bengals and the Washington Commanders over the weekend since we last spoke. The Cincinnati Bengals are getting receiver Tee Higgins back. He's been dealing with a hamstring injury all preseason or during the preseason into the regular season. Missed him for the first 2 weeks. Of course, the Bengals starting 0-2. Perhaps there's a direct correlation. Perhaps there's not, but they're getting him back. And that means the Commanders secondary is going to be even more center stage than it was before. And that does not have Commanders fans very confident heading into this game. With Emmanuel Forbes, the starting Washington Commanders cornerback who's dealing with a thumb injury, had surgery last week to fix that UCL injury. Dan Quinn says he does not necessarily expect him to play. Says more likely next weekend is the time frame for him to return. So that means the Commanders are likely going to turn to either Michael Davis or Noah Igbinoghene. Now, starting in place of Forbes in week 2, Michael Davis played 23 snaps. He got 5 targets his way, allowed 3 catches for 62 yards, 51 yards coming after the catch. Targeting Michael Davis last weekend, Giants quarterback Daniel Jones had a 103.7 NFL passer rating. Now, Noah Igbinoghene eventually came into the game to replace Davis. He played 33 snaps. He was targeted twice, gave up 1 catch for 4 yards, no yards after catch. And Daniel Jones had a 56.3 passer rating targeting Igbinoghene. Also had a pass defended, Noah Igbinoghene did. Now, going back to week 1 against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, which much more resembles this Bengals passing game ability than the New York Giants does, Igbinoghene played 28 snaps in that game after Forbes was injured, was targeted once, and broke up a pass in that game. Igbinoghene was also flagged once in week 2 against the Giants, but as Coach Dan Quinn said following the game and during his day after press conference afterwards, those are the types of flags that you get because you're competing, and he can kind of live with those. Obviously, you don't want those to become habits, but you can live with them as they happen on occasion. And that's what Washington's going to need Monday night against the Cincinnati Bengals is physical, competitive play. So I expect Noah Igbinoghene to get the start. We'll see what happens when the actual game comes down, but I feel like if Michael Davis gets to start again, you're probably going to see Noah Igbinoghene in there sooner rather than later. Anyway, certainly a quicker hook if they do give Michael Davis another opportunity. Cincinnati Bengals are also going to be without defensive tackle Sheldon Rankins. Defensive tackle B.J. Hill is doubtful, and defensive tackle Chris Jenkins is questionable. So a lot of issues up front, and some of those health issues have led to the Bengals allowing 4.49 yards per carry this season, which ranks 16th in the NFL. So right in the middle of the league. And it's been something opposing teams have actually been able to take advantage of against the Bengals this season. The Cincinnati Bengals giving up 159.5 yards per game, which is 26th most, or 26th, 26th least. I don't know, whatever it is. It's bad, guys, is what it is. It's the sixth worst in the NFL, is what it is. So that on top of a 23rd ranked sack / pass attempt rate is why the offensive line can be the hero in this game. They can really do some things to protect Jaden, do some things to open up lanes for Brian Robinson Jr. But if there's one thing, if there's one guy on the Bengals side that's going to mess this whole thing up, it's going to be Trey Hendrickson, their pass rusher. And he's had some really good games this season. He's got 12 total pass rush pressures this season, according to Pro Football Focus's advanced stat tracking. That's tied for sixth most in the NFL. He's turned those into 7 hurries, 3 hits, 2 sacks. And the Bengals have turned all that pressure into the 7th highest interception rate for any defense this season. So pressure from Trey Hendrickson, not just Trey Hendrickson, but Trey Hendrickson more than anybody else. On the Commanders defense, their lead pressure guy has been defensive tackle Daron Payne. He's tied for 32nd in the league with 7. So Trey Hendrickson has 12 pressures. Daron Payne has 7, so almost half in as many games. Defensive coordinator Joe Burrow Jr. talked this week about getting Joe Burrow off his spot as a big way to impact him as a passer. We know Joe Burrow can run when needed, but he's not the super athletic type, not wanting to take over the game with his legs. So if you can get him off of the spot, make him move against his will, that's going to do a lot of things to help the Commanders try to defend this Bengals pass offense specifically. So Payne is going to need to lead the way and get even more pass rush pressures if he possibly can. Dorrance Armstrong Jr., the defensive end, Jonathan Allen, the other defensive tackle, are both second on the team with 5 pressures. Cleveland Farrell and Dante Fowler Jr. each have 3. But of course, Cleveland Farrell is going to be out this week due to a knee issue that he's actually been dealing with since going back to training camp. But this week, it's just too much for him to go with. So he's going to sit out. Dan Quinn says we're going to get more Dante Fowler because of it. Now, the good news is Dante Fowler is much more of a natural pass rusher than Cleveland Farrell is. And his 3 pressures, Dante Fowler's 3 pressures have come on 26 pass rushes, while Cleveland Farrell's 3 pressures have come on 37 pass rushes. So better pass rush win percentage and rate for Dante Fowler over Cleveland Farrell. Now, while we might see more Fowler, I think we're also going to see more Johnny Newton. According to Dan Quinn, Johnny Newton is expected to play more reps than he played in his first week of action, week 2, when he made his NFL debut. But it's actually Johnny Newton has the best pass rush win percentage on the defensive line. So outside linebacker Frankie Louvu has the best on the team, but Newton's is the best on the D line. He's at a 14.3 win percentage, which is still only tied for 70th in the NFL. However, Louvu's team leading 15.4% is tied for 59th in the league. So that pass rush has got to get better. Like, bottom line, like, Frankie Louvu is the best on the team so far, but he's still only ranking 59th in pass rush win rates. And then again, your top defensive lineman is a D tackle in Johnny Newton, who certainly has some versatility, but typically you want your edge rushers being those lead guys in sacks, pressures, and all those things. So the Commanders still need to figure some things out there. Frankie Louvu is the guy that Joe Burrow Jr. says is the man who embodies the Washington Commanders defensive persona the most. He was asked kind of who on the roster really kind of reflects who you want to be as a defense. He mentioned Louvu right off the bat, but then he also mentioned linebacker Bobby Wagner, cornerback Benjamin St-Juste, who certainly had a really good game week 2 against the Giants, and then safety Quan Martin, who's also all over the place, very physical. So those 4 guys, Louvu, Wagner, St-Juste, Martin, he's going to look for them to step up the physicality, look for them to kind of set the tone for the defense, but also you're going to need that pass rush to get home, at least create some pressures against Joe Burrow and the Cincinnati Bengals pass offense. Speaking of St-Juste, his play was improved in week 2. As we dive deeper into our 3 must-dos for Washington to get an upset on Monday Night Football, St-Juste is going to be a critical part to the Washington Commanders doing that. That's coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're doing that today thanks to our friends over at DoorDash. Football is finally back, which means it's time to order your favorite game day foods, snacks, and drinks on DoorDash without missing a single play. Football season means it's watch party season, but unfortunately, not every watch party takes every guest into account. So maybe you show up and there's all kinds of snacks, but not the snacks you're looking for. And you want to get the snacks you're looking for, but kickoff's right about to happen. Hit up DoorDash and have those snacks delivered. DoorDash can come to the rescue and you won't have to miss a single second of the action. On game day, I like to have 3 things: finger foods and beverages like water and soda to keep me hydrated, but also keep me energized. And of course, I'm taking notes. I'm sending out text messages to the insiders, so I got to keep my hands free. So you can use promo code LOCKEDFALL24 for 50% off up to a $10 value when you spend $15 on your first order. It's a limited time offer. Terms apply. Promo is not valid for orders containing alcohol. DoorDash, your door to game day greatness, your door to more. Download the DoorDash app now to get your game day favorites. Must be 21 or older to order alcohol. Drink responsibly. Alcohol available only in select markets. Doing a deep dive into our 3 must-dos of the week for the Washington Commanders to pull off this upset against the Cincinnati Bengals. So every crossover Thursday, we wrap up the crossover Thursday episode with the 3 things that the teams that we cover. So this week, James Rapien, Cincinnati Bengals, myself for the Washington Commanders, the 3 things these teams have to do to get a win in the week that we're talking about. So for the Washington Commanders, those 3 things were continuing to get Jaden Daniels opportunities in the pass game, scoring at least 3 touchdowns, which is a very tall task for this team, and then frustrating Jamar Chase. So Jamar Chase kind of showing some frustrations during the season so far, and he's got some frustrations off the field. Now he's having some frustrations on the field. So certainly want to see those things continue to build and perhaps give the Washington Commanders a chance to take advantage of maybe an eroding internal dynamic for the Cincinnati Bengals. But looking at the opportunity to get Jaden Daniels going a little bit better, week 1 to week 2, Jaden's completion rate went up nearly 10%, but he also went from getting sacked twice against a more aggressive Buccaneers defense, getting sacked 5 times against a less aggressive Giants defense. And I know we're used to the Giants defense being super aggressive, but this version of it is not nearly as aggressive. I know it's weird. The Bengals now have blitzed at about a 10% rate so far this season. That's even less than Giants, certainly less than the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And what it does at times is that prevents a rookie from making quick decisions, because obviously he's going to have more defenders in the field if they're not blitzing, and he's got to sift through them. So if he holds the ball too long, that's when those talented pass rushers can get home. I think that's what happened against the New York Giants. Now, the good news is the Bengals don't have a Dexter Lawrence. They don't have a Brian Burns. I'd say Trey Hendrickson is somewhere between a Brian Burns and a Kayvon Thibodeau, but he's not quite Brian Burns, certainly better than Kayvon. So they do have a Trey Hendrickson. But unlike some defenders, Hendrickson plays almost exclusively on the right side of the field. So that means left tackles like Cornelius Lucas and Brandon Coleman are going to need to be solid. Running backs are going to need to kind of cheat that way. Tight ends are going to need to come in and help him pass pro. Maybe an eligible lineman comes in to line up as a tight end, identify Bengals number 91 early on. And if they can do that, then Daniels should continue to improve on his yards per attempt, NFL passer rating, and get his pressure to sack rate back down closer to the 15% mark, which is what it was against Tampa Bay Buccaneers, as opposed to the 38.5% mark, which is what it was in week 2 against the Giants. That's Giants. That on top of some of the scheme things that we've discussed, some of the opportunities that Daniels just hasn't taken advantage of yet, as he continues to get closer, or more comfortable rather, in the National Football League, continues to feel comfortable in seeing the same things he's seen before. He should be able to take advantage of those opportunities. In fact, I've got Jaden Daniels projected on Prize Picks to get his first passing touchdown of the season this weekend, of his career this weekend. So that's when we're talking about getting Jaden Daniels more opportunities. It's not that the schemes, have the schemed routes haven't come open, because they certainly have. It's now about just giving Jaden the platform to get and stay and become more comfortable under his NFL feet. Scoring at least 3 touchdowns. I know it's a tall task, to ask the Washington Commanders to achieve, especially after they just came off of a game where they had 7 scoring opportunities and didn't score a single one. But the Bengals have the league's 9th best red zone defense entering week 3. They're allowing just 33% of trips into the red zone to produce touchdowns. So it's actually an even harder task to ask the Washington Commanders to achieve, but there is a path towards achieving it, I think. And again, we've only got 2 weeks of trends right now, so that's all I can really look at. But those 2 weeks of trends seem to show me something anyway. And I shared these notes with insiders before I sat down to record this episode. So in week 2, the Chiefs entered the red zone just 2 times. They got a field goal in the first attempt and a touchdown in the second attempt. In week 1, the New England Patriots beat the Cincinnati Bengals. They got in the red zone 4 times. They got 1 touchdown. So that's 6 attempts, 2 touchdowns. 1 touchdown came on a power run through the right side B gap. That was the New England Patriots. 1 came on a play action pass with 2 tight ends. One of the tight ends was an eligible lineman running a route. Those routes flowed from the left to the right side of the field. That was the Kansas City Chiefs. The 3rd touchdown that the Bengals have given up this season came from outside the red zone. It was an outside go route run by Chiefs wide receiver Rashee Rice, going up against Bengals cornerback Cam Taylor-Britt. They had 2 high safeties on, but Von Bell, who is questionable for this game with a back injury, was held in the middle of the field by Patrick Mahomes' eyes and Travis Kelce running a route up the seam. Mahomes locked him in there as soon as he knew his receiver was clear of him, shifted over, dropped the ball in there behind Cam Taylor-Britt, and Rashee Rice was able to do the rest, bringing in the big touchdown. The good thing is these are all things we've seen the Washington Commanders install versions of, and they're all things that we know they're capable of executing. So the things that you've seen opponents do against the Bengals to score touchdowns, we know for a fact this Washington Commanders team can do it. Now, I broke down all the red zone drives that the Bengals have faced as a defense, and I broke down my numbers. So the red zone drives that scored touchdowns, one of them was a 2-run, 1-pass drive. And these are the whole drives may have been longer, but these are just the plays that happened in the red zone, if you follow me. So 2 runs, 1 pass came in the red zone. The other touchdown drive, 3 runs, 1 pass came in the red zone. So you're going to see where we're going with this, right? 5 runs, 2 passes, 71% run calls on the 2 red zone possessions that scored touchdowns. Now, on the red zone possessions that didn't produce touchdowns, the Bengals faced 5 runs, 3 passes on 1, 2 runs, 3 passes on 1. 1 pass got them into the red zone. The field goal was the only red zone play. And then another drive where the pass got into the red zone, and then the field goal was the red zone play. So total 7 runs, 8 passes, adjusted 7 runs, 6 passes, 54% runs. But the bottom line is this season, and again, only 2 week sample size, so it's very small. 71% when on the drives that have had 70% or better run shares and run splits and their play calling, they've produced touchdowns. And the drives where they haven't produced touchdowns, Bengals opponents that is, haven't produced touchdowns, they've only run the ball. They run the ball less than 55% of the time in those red zone plays. So to me, that's a significant enough of a difference that, yeah, it's only 2 games, but it might be kind of indicative of how you want to attack this Bengals defense when you get into the red zone. Now, when we look at the Washington Commanders red zone work, it seems to mesh, right? Week 1, the Washington Commanders got in the red zone 3 times. They ran the ball 6 times in the red zone. They threw the ball 1 time in the red zone. They scored 3 touchdowns. 86% of their play calls were run plays, and they scored 3 times out of 3 times in the red zone against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. In week 2, they got into the red zone 6 times. They ran the ball 9 times. They threw the ball 9 times, and they ended up with a 50% run rate and no touchdown. So again, below 55% produced field goals, over 70% produced touchdowns. The Washington Commanders are basically following the same suit. So it may not even just be a Bengals thing. It may just be a strength on strength and a weakness on weakness thing, right? So again, so for me, that's what I'm looking for. When the Washington Commanders get into the red zone, I know we want Jaden Daniels to get his first touchdown pass. I know. And look, there have been opportunities. Like there were opportunities for Jaden to throw touchdown passes inside the red zone against the Giants. So I don't want to put this on complete scheme thing here. But the bottom line is against this Bengals defense, again, only 2 weeks of 2024 numbers, right? But against this Bengals defense so far, running the ball in the red zone has produced better results than trying to throw the ball against them. The Washington Commanders running the ball in the red zone has produced better results for you rather than trying to pass the ball. So don't make this difficult. Get in the red zone, pound that rock. Lastly, frustrate Jamar Chase. The line that I'm drawing here, 6 catches, 70 yards, no touchdowns. That's the stat line. If the Washington Commanders can hold Jamar Chase to 6 catches, 70 yards, and no touchdowns, they have a chance to win this game. The Cincinnati Bengals in Jamar Chase's career are 6-9 when he has that stat line or worse. They're 15-3 when he has that stat line or better. And when Jamar Chase scores, they're 14-7. So they're winning 2/3 of their games when Jamar Chase just scores a touchdown. Doesn't matter what the yards are, doesn't matter what the catches are. If he scores, they usually win. That's just the bottom line. Even with Tee Higgins back. So the two, Tee Higgins and Jamar Chase, have scored together in 4 games in their careers. The Bengals are actually just 2-2 in those games. You would think Tee Higgins and Jamar Chase score, the Bengals are probably undefeated. They're actually 500. The games they won, that stat line I just gave you, Jamar Chase hit that stat line or better. In the games they lost, even though Tee Higgins scored, Jamar Chase did not hit that stat line. So again, to me, that's the golden, if you want to call it, stat line for Jamar Chase. 6 catches, 70 yards. Hold him to it, which is why you need to put Noah Igbinoghene in there. Don't give up any yards after catch. And again, just because Noah Igbinoghene didn't give up any yards after catch, 1 catch against Malik Neighbors doesn't mean he's not going to do Jamar Chase. But I think given what we've seen, you feel more comfortable about giving that opportunity to Igbinoghene over Michael Davis. So what does it all mean? My prediction, who's going to win this Monday night, coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And we're doing that today thanks to our friends over at FanDuel. NFL fans, you can start the season with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats. You can view live play-by-play and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. In fact, you can make bets during games. We were towards the end of the Illinois-Nebraska game just the other night. I turned it on. I checked out what was going on. I did a little bit of reading, a little bit of research on what went the flow of the game, put some money on that game with about 6 minutes left in the fourth quarter. So even during the game, you can start putting some bets down if you really wanted to, and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. The Washington Commanders are 7.5-point underdogs. So if you think they can overcome that, drop your $5 bet. Take full advantage of this latest opportunity by going to FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Wrapping up today's episode of Locked On Commanders, and we're going to make some predictions here. So like I just kind of alluded to, the Washington Commanders are 7.5-point underdogs. The line is plus 7.5. So for those who aren't super familiar with gambling, I'm not going to give a full gambling expose here. And by all means, please be responsible if you decide to gamble. When you see a team matchup and you see one is plus, that means they're underdogs. So you're getting the Commanders plus 7.5 points, which means if you take that line, as long as the Commanders lose by no more than 7 points, because you can't lose by 7.5, right? As long as they don't lose by more than 7 points, you win. So if you take the Commanders plus 7.5 and they lose by 7, you win your bet, even though the Commanders lost. Now, if the Commanders were minus 7.5 and you took that, they would have to win by 7.5 points, which means they'd have to win by 8 in order for you to win your bet. So on the season so far, we're 2-0 on the year straight up. Predicted the Commanders to lose to the Bucs, unfortunately. Predicted the Commanders to beat the Giants. We're straight up 2-0 there. We're 1-1 against the spread. The Commanders did not cover the spread. Covering the spread means so if you're 7.5-point underdogs, they would cover the spread if they did not lose by 7.5 points or more. If they lost by 7.5 points or less, they cover the spread. But since they lost by more than whatever the spread was for week 1, they do not cover the spread. So 1-1 against the spread. Again, this weekend, Commanders plus 7.5 underdogs. I've got the Bengals 27. I've got the Washington Commanders 21. Now, my commandergameday.com prediction, if you read that Sports Illustrated prediction article for the staff, I actually predicted 24-17, but with Tee Higgins coming back and with Cleveland Farrell not coming back and with the injuries to the defensive line, holding some players out that we found out since my first prediction for commandergameday.com, I'm going to up the score a little bit. I'm actually going to up the score essentially the same for each side, but 27-21 is mine. So I have the Commanders covering the spread, right? So if you were to take Commanders plus 7.5 and I'm right, you would win your bet. But I do have the Commanders losing head-to-head, straight up on the money line. So those are my predictions for the weekend. Some interesting prop bets here. The over-under for the game is 46.5 total points. So for those unfamiliar with over-unders, for that avenue, the over-under means that both teams' scores combined will meet or exceed that number. So if the Bengals and Commanders score more than 46.5 points total and you bet the over on that, then you would win. If you bet the under and they come in under that number, you would win. My prediction equals 48 points. So obviously I'm taking the over on the 46.5 points. Brian Robinson Jr. is a plus 165 odds to score a touchdown anytime. What that means, if you bet $100, B-Rob scores a touchdown, you make $165. And of course, you don't have to bet $100. I wouldn't recommend you bet $100. That's the simplest way to do the math, right? If you bet $10, you win $1.65 or whatever it is. So on and so forth. Maybe it's $16.50. I'm not doing math quickly right now. Jaden Daniels is plus 135 to score a touchdown anytime. The interesting thing there is that to qualify, Jaden has to run or catch a touchdown. So passing touchdowns don't catch for any time touchdown scores for FanDuel. So the odds say it's actually more likely that Jaden runs or catches a touchdown than B-Rob will. They're minus 280 odds for Jaden Daniels to throw his first career touchdown pass. Minus 280 means if you bet $280, you win $100. You have to bet 280, win 100. The less you bet, obviously, the less you win. Things like that. So again, those are some prop bets that I'm keeping my eye on. The overall prediction that I've got and the over-under that I've got for this game as well. And that's going to wrap it up for today's episode. Our next episode of Locked On Commanders will come from Cincinnati following Monday Night Football and hopefully the Washington Commanders' second win of the 2024 NFL season. In the meantime, if you got any questions or comments, all you got to do is text me directly. Become a Locked On Commanders insider to do that at joinsubtext.com/LockedOnCommanders. We got some new ones again this week. I appreciate all of you who are coming through and giving that a try. And I appreciate all of you, those of you who have given it a try and are sticking around. For your next listen, check out Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland gets you kicked off in the morning. And then Tony Wiggins comes through with the barbershop atmosphere in the afternoon for some real NFL talk. It's the all new Locked On NFL, and it's twice per day. As always, thank you for making Locked On Commanders your first listen of the day, every day. Every day, thank you for coming through on a regular basis like you do. Until we speak again, if you're out and about, please be safe, be kind, and I will see you right back here next time for another episode of Locked On Commanders, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.